So, I watched this anime that everyone has been talking about since the very first episode, Oshi no Ko. The art style and the focus on idol culture seemed interesting to me, as someone who's watched a couple of shows about idols, so I expected a show in that similar vein. What reason would I have not to, right? Now I can safely say, instead of Oshi no Ko, this show should be called, oh shit, this show's really good. I'm not kidding when I say that this is one of the most thought-provoking shows to come out of anime this year. Is it perfect? Not really, and just to get this out of the way, here are some of my problems with the show. One of which being the very first episode. I understand that they wanted to set everything up so we get to the meat of the narrative, but there is absolutely no need for the prologue, the very first episode, to be 80 goddamn minutes. It is a very big commitment, which is also ruined when it's not engaging enough. This episode without a doubt tries to develop their characters so much, it overwhelms the audience with a lot of information that most of which is, I'm sorry, but not relevant to the main narrative at all. Most of the pilot is focused on Ai Hoshino and her character, her thoughts, her feelings. While I understand the elements of the themes that the later episodes expand upon, there's so much information on Ai and how she navigates the world, which is either overwritten by some of the later characters in a more digestible way, or never expanded upon again. Because of that, most of the pilot doesn't justify its runtime and it turns some audiences off before the series actually gets good. The dub does fix the issue of overwhelming info dumping, so I would recommend that. Just, be ready for some weird performances here and there.
Oopsie-daisy! I almost flashed my boots right at you, President!
Speaking of the prologue, there's something else I don't really understand for now, the reincarnation angle. On one hand, it does help strengthen Ruby's motivation to be an idol against all odds, which is really compelling. But I don't really like how that leads to Aqua having a crush on his mother because of liking her from his past life. Come to think of it, Aqua's obsession with Ai before and after he got reincarnated is really sus. Especially when you realize that she was 16 and he was 30 something. And later, Ruby confesses that she fell in love with the doctor from her past life when she was also 16? Nah. It also doesn't really play into their characters after establishing their motivations, which isn't really a good reason to have that 30 to 40 minute prologue of who they were. Feels like you could touch up the script here and there and make it so their motivations work without playing into the reincarnation angle. Maybe it's too early to say right now, I don't know. Criticism over, let's get to what I absolutely love about this show. And of course, heavy spoilers ahead. With most anime shows, their story comes first and foremost, with not much to say. This show sets itself in the 2020s and tells its story about the 2020s. The writing and thematic influences have a lot of social commentary about the entertainment industry, which was very appealing to me. I used to work in the media in my early teens, so a lot of the writers' frustrations about the industry are quite relatable to me. To quote Jeanette McCurdy, child actors like Kana are playing an adult's game and even they are unaware of it, leading to so much stunted self-confidence issues and a heightened need for validation. We all do face that need when we're on social media, but imagine how much more intense that is when all eyes are on you all the time. The show that Aqua and Kana co-star in when they're teens goes out of its way to showcase its more commercial and corporate nature, by not giving a shit about good direction, good acting, and even good production. It mirrors how some studios can just yeet a product from a pre-existing IP out while not understanding or caring to understand the source material. As much as I complained about the extended focus on Ai, her being aware of the game that she's in and playing by the rules does set the stage for Ruby and Kana's arcs as they pursue an idol career of their own. Seeing them learn through experience and one another's know-how of the digital world expands on how idol culture has changed over the years. For better or worse, that's for you to decide. Anyone can be an idol if they're passionate about it, but I think groups like Sorbet have turned into a cautionary tale of how idol culture has just gotten more toxic. Speaking of Sorbet, it's not a show about social media without mentioning the holy buzzword.
Cancelled!
It's only tackled once in the entire show, but I think the episode where it was ended up being the best of the show. Seeing Akane take all the hatred around her personally to the point that it almost drove her to take her own life was really harrowing stuff. It just goes to show that despite being in the spotlight, these are real people who are doing something that they're passionate about that you inadvertently end up hurting. The down-to-earth angle of all these struggles, along with how all the characters overcome them, are very interesting and really compelling stuff. It is also very openly honest about its views on social media, as it goes out of its way to show how it makes or breaks people. It's a fact we all know, but seeing it portrayed in such a visceral and straightforward way really sucks you in more. I like how the two lead characters interact with the themes as they learn with us about the nature of their goals. I personally find Aqua's storylines more interesting mainly because of the way that he vocalizes his thoughts about why he does what he does. In a way, he's quite similar to Rue from Euphoria. I also respect Ruby's storylines as it's clear that they're a break from the more dramatic, serious stuff with some light-hearted idol shenanigans. But just because Ruby's storylines are not as weighty on the overall narrative doesn't mean that they're any less important to progress the show's themes and messages. Speaking of, let's go to the characters. Aqua's journey of tracking down his mother's killer and how he only sees his relationships as tools to achieve that goal is really tragic, and that's what makes him more interesting. You don't want to see him go down this path, but you understand why and you feel sorry for him. Ruby's journey of being an idol seems boring on paper. And it is, but the added layer of her not being able to do anything in her past life and finally being allowed to live her dreams adds a bit of an emotional layer to her. Kana is the annoying sidekick, but even she has some depth to her. I just wish she wasn't stuck with being jealous over Aqua. That feels like an afterthought to generate a one-sided drama between those two. Akane is probably the most interesting character, and the scene where she completely psychoanalyzed Ai to become her was freaking awesome. I hope she gets a bigger role in the second season, considering she's in the position to anger Aqua from him straying too far from the light. And based on the way that the show ended, it's gonna seem like Akane is just gonna be in a love triangle with Aqua and Kana. Fine, I guess, but a character as good as Akane shouldn't get a plotline as shitty and generic as a fucking love triangle, you know what I mean? The other characters aren't much else other than symbols and mediums for the writer's view of the industry they work for. Which brings me to my biggest nitpick with the writing for this season. For some reason, some, if not most, characters serve to be a mouthpiece for the messages and themes first, and be characters second. They would go on these long monologues about their thought processes, which lean into them commenting on the nature of the industry they're in. And I'm sorry, but that doesn't really feel like an interesting way to get your point across, and robs most of your characters of any depth or nuance to their psyches. Subtlety is a blessing. Let your characters organically show the audience the negatives of the industry, instead of telling the audience with a 4-paragraph monologue. And ironically enough, two of the biggest characters suffering from a lack of nuance are the Hoshino twins. As of this season, Aqua's been in 2 arcs, Ruby's also been in 2, but we haven't seen them develop in the same way that Akane or Kana do. Aqua's the most vocal about his grievances with the industry and how cold and heartless he is, but we haven't really gotten a moment where he doesn't follow the plot and has its own moment of growth. Meanwhile, Ruby is stuck with a pretty standard story arc which is disconnected from Aqua's, and she isn't really allowed to have a moment of her own either. It sucks that your leads are just following the narrative instead of developing with the narrative. Hopefully that'll be fixed in the later season though, but that's enough about the majority of the season. Everyone knows that a good ending would be the best catalyst for your interest for the next. So does it end well? I'll be honest, I had low expectations after the penultimate episode. The episode is fine for sure, but a fine episode before your season finale isn't gonna cut it, when the previous episodes were so much better. I guess they just wanted to end the season by leaving their main characters in an interesting place going into the next season. But the journey to that is, I'll be honest, really boring. Both the episodes spend a lot of time to reiterate Kana's inner turmoil, and they do so in a way that feels repetitive. Based on how everyone in the cast already has a rocky upbringing, which is a part of being in the industry after all, Kana doesn't stand out. It's more of the same, and the fact that the last couple of episodes go into a lot of detail that we already know feels like we're just spinning our wheels. Again, that would be okay, but these being our final episodes of the season bring down the rest of the season as a whole, regardless of how great it was till then. But those last 5 to 10 minutes did end up making me interested for the second season, I'll be honest. All in all, despite the relatively meh ending, Oshinoko is still an absolute recommend from me and way better than that other show involving female pop stars navigating their way to the entertainment industry. Seriously though, the comparison between this and The Idol is laughable.
Fucking stretch that tiny little
I wanted to give it a 9 out of 10 before the last 2 episodes, but after the final arc, I'm gonna have to bump it down to a 7 out of 10. Still good, but could have stuck the ending better. Thanks for watching.